Yeah, welcome everybody. It's really my pleasure to be here. And I think I've been in Pennsylvania a couple of times talking about these subjects before. Debbie's back online. Great. Okay.
Okay, so sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, so I think we should be ready to go if you're ready, Katie.
I'm ready.
Okay, so I will say welcome and hello everyone out there. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar entitled Can We Talk? Getting Real About the End of Life, a virtual presentation by Katy Butler, the author of The Art of Dying Well and Knocking on Heaven's Door. Our speaker, Katy, is a best-selling author and medical journalist who spent 6.5 years as a part-time family caregiver and full-time medical advocate for her parents during their final years of life. Out of that experience, Katy became fascinated with how families cope with aging and dying. So she wrote 2 highly acclaimed, user-friendly books about it. The first is Knocking on Heaven's Door, was a New York Times bestseller. The second, The Art of Dying Well, a practical guide to a good end of life, is not only about dying, but about living well in later life. Her work has won many awards and has been widely praised by medical leaders Ira Byock and Lucy Kalanithi, and best-selling authors Barbara Ehrenreich and Anne Lamott. Katy is no stranger to our neck of the woods here in Pennsylvania. A little further up east, she has given previous speeches in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and at the medical schools of Jefferson, Temple, and the University of Pittsburgh. Katy grew up on the East Coast around Boston and in Connecticut, and she is coming to us and speaking to us from her home in Mill Valley, California. So before we turn the presentation over to Katy, we're going to show you a brief video and then we will turn things over. So bear with me and I will see if I can bring this video up. Okay, so I am Katy, I think we're going to have to share this sadly afterward. I have to log on. It's telling me that I can't share the screen. So bear with me. If you want to start,
Sure.
Then I can let you know.
Sure. It's a great little video, and I think it can fit just about anywhere. So I'll let you take care of the technical and I'll begin. So first I just want to thank Debbie and Sue Mann and Conema Health Systems, Blue Shield and 1889 Foundation for making this possible. And as I said before we started formally, I think creating a sense of community is so important in this time when we're facing very intense encounters with illness and death and a whole new form of illness. So creating a Zoom like this and using chat and creating a sense of community is so important. So I want to thank all of those people who helped fund this event and had the foresight to think of putting this on. So anyway, I'll go back to the video in a little while, but I think there's a lot of healthcare people who are on the call today and a lot of family caregivers. And I hope there'll also be some people who are also aging themselves, like me. I'm 71. Because I think one of the things I want to talk about today is our emotional legacy. Having been a family caregiver, I know how important it is to have some clarity about the ones we love, what they wish for, what would be best for them. There's a lot of love and there's a lot of uncertainty and confusion when we go through this final life stage with those we love. So first, I'm going to give you a little map. I'm going to tell you how I came to write these books, what I learned that I think could be useful for you in your journeys. And I'm going to read some stories from the book because I do think That's the best way we learn. We learn through stories, not just advice and lectures. And I'm hoping for those of you who are healthcare workers yourself, that I might be able to model some really user-friendly, simple language to talk about these issues. It's very easy for those of us who are not healthcare professionals to get intimidated in our conversations with healthcare professionals. And the more that we can remove these communication barriers and really speak from the heart to each other, I think the better some of these end of life and late life discussions can go. So how I wrote this book. First, I'm going to take you back to my early 40s. I spent 6 months in a Buddhist community in southern France. And there, every morning with the monks and nuns, I used to repeat these words. I am of the nature to grow old. There's nothing I can do to prevent growing old. I am of the nature to get sick. There's nothing I can do to prevent getting sick. I am of the nature to die. There's nothing I can do to prevent my death. Now, every religion has some version of these reminders. In the Christian tradition, it's much more dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. And in the Jewish tradition, man is like the grass that withers, like a fleeting cloud, like a flower that fades, yea, like a dream that vanishes. And I find a certain beauty in these reminders. I don't think they're supposed to make us feel gloomy. I think they're supposed to sharpen our awareness of how grateful we are for the time that we have on earth, and how grateful we are for the opportunity to love and support each other and really appreciate every day. So I was in my early 40s when I was first really exposed to this thinking. And the truth is, it just went straight over my head. I was young, relatively. My parents were enjoying very active early retirement. They weren't sick in any way. And modern medicine had advanced so much that maybe God would make an exception in our case and that we would never have to face any of these issues. But then, when I was in my early 50s, my dad had a devastating stroke. He was 79 and he became dependent on my mother at that point and remained dependent on her until she died. And he had a succession of mini strokes, dementia, went partly blind, macular degeneration, going deaf, a very slow physical and spiritual ordeal through the end of his life. I think it would have been hard no matter what. But looking back on it, my mother and I came to feel that we had lost our voices with his medical professionals. The thing that really stood out for us was that he was given a pacemaker a couple of years into this, and it was without any kind of meaningful discussion of our values, of what my dad's future might look like, how he might decline, if there was a point where turning off the pacemaker would actually become a kind and wise thing to do. We never had any of those discussions. My dad actually died very peacefully on a hospice unit of pneumonia when he was just 85. But we do think that he could have been spared some suffering if we had been more savvy about our interactions with medicine. And there's almost like a conspiracy of silence between medical people and aging or people with serious illness. Often the medical people are sort of afraid to raise some of these issues or to take away hope. And on the other side, sometimes we feel intimidated and like we can't express our real worries and fears with them because we feel they're too busy, the time is too short. So what I'm hoping to do is really give you some language and some thoughts about how you might remain empowered, compassionate, and living out of your own values rather than your fears. So my dad had that terrible stroke. We had that experience. I became really curious about modern death and how it had become in some ways harder than death in the old days. And so I wrote first one book that was a memoir of caregiving, and then the second book, which is The Art of Dying Well. And this is really an attempt to give people a manual to a map of this future so that you can optimize your sense of community, your sense of support, and have death go the way you'd like it. So I want to start by reading a little passage from the book. I interviewed hundreds of healthcare professionals and also people like me who had gone through long-term caregiving. And this is what my conclusion is. Got my page, the right page here? Here we go. Okay. In the years that I've spent listening to hundreds of people's stories of good and difficult declines and death, I've learned one thing. People who are willing to contemplate their aging, vulnerability, and mortality often live better lives in old age and illness and experience better deaths than those who don't. They keep shaping lives of comfort, joy, and meaning, even as their bodies decline. They get clear-eyed about the trajectory of their illnesses so they can plan. They regard their doctors as their consultants, not their bosses. They seek out medical allies who can help them thrive, even in the face of disappointment and adversity, and they prepare for a good death. They often enroll in hospice earlier, and they feel and function better, and sometimes they even live longer than the people who explore maximum treatment. They make peace with the coming of death, and they seize the time to forgive, to apologize, and to thank those they love. They rethink the meaning of hope, and they often die with less physical suffering and just as much attention to the sacred as our ancestors did. So, Debbie, have you got the video up now, or do you want to wait? Okay, I'm going to continue to wait then. All right,
Still working, Katie, thanks.
What? Yeah.
We're still working.
Oh, okay, good. All right, you let me know. So that's the hope I have for you. The hope I have for you is to be empowered, to be realistic, and to make good plans so that you can leave a good emotional legacy. And sometimes our emotional legacy is more important than the tea set that we leave or the savings account that we have for people. And part of our emotional legacy is leaving our loved ones with a sense of confidence and peace about the way our deaths went. So how are we going to get there? I start with have a vision and work back from there. What is your vision of a good death? Do you want your dog on the bed? Do you want to die at home? Do you want your pain well controlled? Do you want your family with you? And what is very important to many, many people is not having their family be burdened financially or practically by the care of their last years of life. And all of these things are things that people say, and being at peace spiritually, that's another thing people rate very, very high. And for most people, those values are higher than living till the very last second possible. They're more concerned about a peaceful death that leaves their survivors in good shape. So have a vision, talk to your family about it, and work back from there. How are you going to get there? Stay in charge of your medical care, and I'm going to read you a story shortly about that. Have a map of what your future illness looks like. It's very important to have a map of the future. Make a plan, clean house, and I'm talking emotionally, and finally bring in the sacred. So let's go through those one by one. First of all, stay in charge. I want to tell you the story of Amy Berman. She is a nurse in Manhattan. She was in her early 50s. She took a shower and she noticed that there was a roughened patch of skin on her left breast. It turned out to be inflammatory breast cancer. Now, most of you know that many breast cancers are eminently treatable and even curable, really. But inflammatory breast cancer is a bad one with very, very bad outcome statistics. And she knew that, being a nurse. She went to Philadelphia to consult with the top expert in her cancer, and she met her mother there. And they were planning the next day to go shopping for wigs because they figured she was going to get chemo and it was going to rob her of her hair. But the night before this meeting, she was standing in the rain and her cell phone rang, and it was her existing oncologist from back in Manhattan. And she said to she said to Amy, I got bad news. A biopsy shows this cancer has already spread to your bones. And a stage 4 cancer like that is not curable. It is sometimes manageable and treatable, but it is not curable. And so Amy knew that she was really looking at the reality of the end of her life. The next morning, she went in to see this fancy oncologist. And this is how the meeting went. She told him about this very bad news. He didn't pause. Here's what we're going to do, he said, plowing ahead with his original plan. 6 weeks of intense chemotherapy, followed by surgery to remove her breast, then radiation and another round of chemo. This aggressive Hail Mary treatment plan would expose her to great suffering, and then she would bump along for who knew how long in severely damaged health. And for what? Her cancer could not be rooted out. She questioned the unspoken assumption that the most harrowing treatment was going to produce the best possible result. There was no conversation, she said. He was an expert in everything except what really mattered to me. I thanked him for his time and I left. In other words, she fired the fancy oncologist. And I want to encourage you to realize that is one of your options if you're not developing a really good communication with any of your doctors. Back in Manhattan, she went to her original oncologist who asked a more welcome question. What do you want to accomplish? Now you see the difference between those two questions. Here's what we're going to do versus what do you want to accomplish? Amy said she hoped for the Niagara Falls trajectory, to live as well as possible for as long as possible, and then to plunge over the waterfall to death without undue delay. She really cared about maintaining a high quality of life. And as a result, they had a real conversation together. They decided no chemo, no radiation, no surgery. And instead they put her on a estrogen suppressing treatment, which has delayed the progress of her cancer. It is now 9 years since Amy stood weeping with her mother in the rain. She knows her days are numbered and she accepts it, but she remains on the top side of Niagara Falls. She's never spent an afternoon in a recliner while a toxic chemotherapy dripped into her veins. She's never been hospitalized or been too weak to drive or needed a home health aide. She has climbed the Great Wall of China, ridden a jet ski to the base of the Statue of Liberty, and seen her daughter Stephanie graduate from college and get married. She's made quality of her life her priority. And paradoxically, she's outlived many people who opt for more grueling treatments. Most doctors, she said, focus only or mainly on length of life. That's not my only metric. So you see how important it is to stay in touch with your own values, what you care about the most. Is it quality of life? Is it length of life? Is it some hybrid between the two? Does it change over time? You need to be able to speak up and talk about what really matters to you. You need to have someone say to you, what's our goal here? What do you care about the most? So stay in charge and find doctors who you can understand, who will say things in plain English, and will have these very real conversations with you. Now I want to reach you the next really important thing to me, and that's having a map of the trajectory of your illness. We're in these strange times now because obviously COVID is a very, very unpredictable illness. There is nobody who can tell you if you test positive for COVID, exactly how your trajectory is going to go. You might have a mild case, a severe case. You may end up in an intensive care unit. And we don't know enough yet to predict. But 9 out of 10 of us are going to die of something else. 9 out of 10 people right now are dying of other things. And a lot of those things have a recognized trajectory, a recognized future pathway. I want to show you my biggest idea to you. I got this from a doctor at Kaiser Foundation Hospitals in California. And that is getting your doctor to draw a sketch of what this trajectory looks like. This can literally be a pen on the back of a napkin. It doesn't have to be a work of art. And it's not precise, but it does give you a sense of how things might go. So here's some 4 very common trajectories. The first is what Amy Berman said, the Niagara Falls trajectory, living at a high quality of life with a rapid drop-off. Most of us want this. Most of us want to die in our sleep, but at least 80% of us, 90% of us are not going to die in our sleep. But this is a trajectory, for example, a very healthy person, a younger person perhaps, who might die by suicide or an overdose. Some forms of cancer that move very, very rapidly and are not amenable to treatment can die with this very, very rapid progression. Or, for example, kidney failure, where you do not go on dialysis, a fairly fast, gentle, and painless end of life. Then there's what my dad had, which the staircase. My dad ended up with vascular dementia, repeated strokes. We went to the Alzheimer's Association and they sketched us a sketch very much like this. And so my mom and I got comfortable with the fact that my dad was going to have these plateaus, then a decline, then another plateau, then another decline. And this is very much what happened until he finally developed pneumonia, which was his final illness. Then there's the looping decline, heart failure, kidney failure. Yeah, got it. There we go. So you see where you have a crisis, you go down, you might go in the hospital, things get restabilized, you're not quite at the same level, you go along for a while, and then you have another decline, and another loop, and another decline. All of these patterns really give people a sense of the end game. And I found it oddly reassuring to have some map of how things were going to look for my dad, especially toward the end of his life. And then finally, the dwindles. This is a favorite term for hospice nurses, the dwindles. This is somebody who might have multiple minor and major chronic conditions, but there's no one thing that's standing out and creating crisis. This often happens with dementia. So you have this very, very gradual glacial decline into death. So ask for a little map, a little drawing, a trajectory of your illness from your doctor. This is something you can do fairly early in the course of a serious disease. And it will give you won't feel so blindsided when these crises come up or these big changes come. And they will, they'll come to all of us. Now I want to segue into a really empowering part of the talk. It's kind of the meat and potatoes of this. It's very helpful when you have any kind of a sense of the trajectory of your life and your illnesses, especially when your health is starting to decline or you're in your 50s or above. But of course, young people do die too. Young people much more likely to die of accident or violence than older people. And so this is a reality too. And in a way, we all need to get clear on how we want to be treated when we have something that is fatal, could be fast moving or slow moving, because there's a dirty little secret within medicine. It's very known to people in medicine and very unknown to people outside medicine. And that is that the default within medicine is to do everything and keep you alive and ward off death until finally somebody in the family or you yourself says, this is enough, no more. And that will happen even when the activities like CPR, for example, or being intubated in the ICU, even when the likelihood of success is just tiny and the intervention itself is extremely painful and takes people away from a peaceful or a good death. So the default path, which is the path you'll be on if you don't make a plan, is for maximum treatment. And if you want anything different, if you're concerned maybe because you've seen a relative on a feeding tube for a very long time, and that's not a fate you wish for yourself, or a long time intubated or on a ventilator, you're going to have actually have a written plan and have, most importantly, talk to your family about your wishes. So I want to introduce you to some ways that you can record your wishes And your wishes can be anything. It doesn't have to be no ICU. You might say, I want the ICU, but if it's in writing, you're not going to leave your family confused, second guessing, doubting the decisions they made in those health crises. So one form is the advance directive and the medical power of attorney. These documents often go together in one document. You appoint somebody to make your decisions if you're not capable of expressing them yourself. And then you also get a chance to record what these wishes are that you have. What are your values around end-of-life medical care? I think one of the best ones you can find is this one. It's called Prepare for Your Care, and you can find it on prepareforyourcare.org. It's very user-friendly. I like that it has graphics, so it's not just this intimidating legal document. You can fill it out online, or you can print it out and fill it out by hand. Give it to your doctor, give it to your family members. What's lovely about this, if you go to prepareforyourcare.org, they have a special category for Pennsylvania, so you have one that's appropriate for your state. And if that is not working for you, and let's face it, a lot of us find these documents intimidating and overwhelming. 70% of people have not filled them out. And one of my favorites, which you can also get online, is called 5 Wishes. This is just the sample of the introductory page. And what I love about 5 Wishes is that it is the shallow end of the swimming pool. It doesn't just ask you about these grim questions like intubation or feeding tubes, horrible things to contemplate. It also asks you about very meaningful, emotional or spiritual dimensions to your living and dying. So let me just read you a couple from 5 Wishes. My wish for how I want people to treat me. Cross out any you don't want. I wish to have my hand held and be talked to when possible, even if I don't seem to respond to the voice or touch of others. I wish to die at home, if that can be done. And here's another section. My wish for what I want my loved ones to know. I wish to be forgiven for the times I have hurt my family, friends, and others. If there's to be a memorial service for me, I wish for the service to include the following. List music, songs, readings, or specific requests that you might have. So what I love about this is that you can address your needs and your desires as a full human being and not just as a bundle of diagnoses. This is so important to us because dying is a relational, emotional event for ourselves and for our entire families. So this is so important. Thank you. That's the meat and potatoes part of this. And we'll also put up some guidance for you about where you can download these at the very end of our webinar. All right. Okay, so now moving on to these later stages of living and dying, what I called cleaning house. Hospice nurses love to talk about, thank you, I love you, please forgive me, I forgive you, and goodbye. These are the emotional tasks of the end of life. And what's so important is that we can say all of them except goodbye at any time. And I think especially now with COVID, that awareness that we could lose somebody just like that, it's more front of mind than it used to be. A very dear friend, actually a former editor of mine, a former boss, died by suicide 3 days ago. And we did mourn on Facebook together, a lot of us who had known him, but I did find myself regretting that I had never really thanked him fully for the wonderful role he played in my professional life. So it's just a reminder, when somebody crosses your mind and you want to thank them for something that they've brought into your life or done for you, don't wait. There's no need to wait. I want to read you a story about Katy Doobie. And this is, again, part of your emotional legacy, how important these last-minute discussions can be for your family members. Do not underestimate the power of your emotional legacy. Katy Doobie was raised on the East Coast by a violent alcoholic mother. She had no memory of ever hearing her mother say, I love you. Katy eventually moved to California, but the two women's relationship continue to be marked by bitterness, distrust, and estrangement. When Katy was in her 40s, her mother developed breast cancer. A little more than a week before her death, she was admitted to the hospital. Over the phone, she told Katy, "Don't come. I don't want to see you." Katy got on a plane anyway, on the advice of a friend who told her that if she didn't, she would regret it for the rest of her life. Katy walked into her mother's hospital room. There, she found a tiny figure curled up in bed, shrunken, yellow, bald, bronzed by jaundice, as she later described it in a poem. This was the mother she had feared for so long. The two women looked at each other in silence. Katy's mother said aloud, for the first time that Katy could remember, "I love you, I'm sorry." That was it. Katy replied, "I love you and I'm sorry." Those few moments, said Katy, cleared up a lifetime of misunderstanding each other. So don't underestimate the power of your legacy. Now, I want to go back for a minute to the question of these advance directives. Those of you who are caregivers for ailing and ancient parents, any of you who contemplate that you too are going to face at some point these choices, I want to talk to you about another document, which is called the POLST. This is Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. And this is a copy of the Pennsylvania version. Each state has its own version. And you have an organization called papolst.org where you can download wonderful user-friendly introductions to the POLST. The beautiful thing about the POLST is that it's usually on a very, very bright pink paper. I actually have a close friend who has late-stage terminal lung cancer. And I went over to his house the other day and he has a POLST stuck to the outside porch door so that any EMT who comes in, if he has a health crisis, will know immediately that he does not want CPR. So it's kind of like a Goldilocks document. You've got a kind of small, medium, and large versions. It's a checklist thing here. It's signed by a doctor. You can ask your doctor to fill one out for you. This is most valuable for people who are in their like last year or two of life. They're already frail. We might have multiple chronic illnesses, might be seeing multiple ologists, you know when people reach that kind of Humpty Dumpty stage of life. Maybe they frequent trips in and out of the emergency room, always getting worse, never better. So the POLST gives you these three choices. You might want comfort care only. I think this is such an important phrase. I wish I had heard that phrase, comfort care only, when I was helping care for my dad. It would have clarified our values and our medical choices immensely for me and made me feel a lot less guilty about choosing comfort care only rather than extreme measures that were actually not helpful for him and created pain and havoc. So there's comfort care only. There's kind of a middle range of like, yes, I do want some treatments. I might want antibiotics, but hold the line, no extreme measures. And then finally, there is full treatment. Sorry, I'm holding it up in reverse here. Then there's full treatment, which is yes, take me to the hospital, do give me CPR, do put me in the intensive care unit, do give me a feeding tube. So you get to describe in great detail what really seems valid and workable for you and what might really help you versus what might just create havoc and confusion toward the end of your life. And I hope we do get to see the video at some point because it pinpoints exactly this issue for a family. All right, so that is the POLST. That's again the meat and potatoes. It's a document you fill out with the help of your doctor. It is signed by a doctor. It is observed by all medical personnel from EMT on. Much less likely that there's going to be some slip up and your wishes are not followed the way they could be with an advance directive. But again, most important of all, talk to your family. Talk to them about what scares you. Talk to them about what you value and love about your life. Because I think maybe New Year's Day is a good time to talk about it, but to check in with your family and talk openly about these things. It can make such a difference on the other end after you have left, and they can feel I feel good about what we did. I feel good that I followed mom's wishes. I feel good that she had a peaceful death, or that she had a chance to die at home, or that we had a chance to really discuss what really mattered to us. These are huge, important conversations, and they're a much more important kind of hope than meaningless, dishonest hopes toward the end of life. So thank you. So finally, I hope we're doing okay on time. Yeah, we are. I want to talk about bringing the sacred into the final experience of dying, the period that hospice nurses or any kind of medical profession, they usually call it active dying. It's that last 3 to 8 days of life when things are really, all the systems are shutting down and the focus is really just on keeping someone comfortable. Now, dying has been overly medicalized in the last 50 years or so. So a lot of people are dying now in hospitals or nursing homes where the situation isn't really allowing for the sense of a sacred. And especially this is true now because of restricted visiting in a lot of hospitals and nursing homes. And I am hoping that as time goes on, we're going to get more savvy about personal protective equipment, train family members better, and allow more visitation. But until that happens, we're going to have to do some of our grieving and our death vigiling at home. I want to encourage you to think about creating a home altar in a situation like this. It could be just on like a TV tray like this, where you have their photo, you have their name, you have flowers, and you can light a candle, like a votive candle perhaps, or in the Jewish tradition, there's the yahrzeit candle. You can buy it at Safeway in the kosher food section. Burns for 24 hours. It's a beautiful ritual. Anyway, you can light a candle and be with that person in your imagination, even if you cannot be there in person with them. We're having to adapt so many rituals that have helped people through millennia through the experience of death and dying. And we're having to create these sort of technological versions and do the best we can for this very difficult period. So bring a sense of the sacred in. If someone's dying in the hospital, you can bring in these little LED candles that don't have a flame that will be allowed, and they do create a sense of sacredness. In a nursing home, you can sometimes ask for a private room so that you have a little more room for family members. And again, you can bring in photographs, bring in flowers, create a really the best sense you can of who this person was and what they value. So I'm going to end with a ritual, which was taught to me by some nurses, some oncology, cancer nurses in Santa Barbara, California. There had been a change in the hospital protocol. And so now, instead of having a funeral home come in and handle the body with some reverence, the body was kind of being zipped into a body bag and hustled out the back elevator, and they were not feeling good about it. So they created this bathing and honoring practice for the body of the dead. What I love about this is that when I used to give talks to people in person, and I would repeat this ritual, I would see people closing their eyes, and then they would come up to me afterwards and they said, "Oh, while you were doing that, I imagined doing it on behalf or with the body of someone who I loved, whose death had not gone particularly the way I would have loved it." And so in their imaginations, they were getting to replay this ritual. Okay? So you wash the body of the dead and dress it in a clean hospital gown or possibly clothes from home. And this is what they did. Let's get my page here. The nurses encourage relatives and friends to anoint the body with lavender oil. "The physicality seems very helpful," said one of the nurses to me. "I have a theory that after witnessing a death, we go into shock and our minds become numb and chaotic. When we start bathing and honoring and touching our loved ones, our bodies understand what our minds cannot." I just love that. Our bodies understand what our minds cannot. Here is an adapted version of their ceremony for your use. As the hair is anointed with oil, a nurse or a family member recites, "We honor Jane's hair that the wind has played with. Next, a dab of oil is gently rubbed on the brow as someone says, "We honor Jane's brow, the birthplace of her thoughts." In each succeeding sentence, the name of the dead person is inserted in the appropriate place. And you can follow along with me if you wish and touch your own body, because we're all suffering from not enough touch, from skin hunger. We honor your eyes that have looked on us with love and viewed the beauty of the earth. We honor your nostrils, the gateway of breath. We honor your ears that listen for our voices. We honor your lips that have spoken truth. We honor your shoulders that have borne burdens and strength. We honor your heart that has loved us. We honor your arms that have embraced us. We honor your hands that have held our hands and done so many things in this life. We honor your legs that carried you into new places of challenge. We honor your feet that walked your own path through this life. We give thanks to the gifts you have given us in our lifetime. We give thanks for the memories that we have created together. We have been honored to be part of your life. So thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I don't know if we're going to get the video or not. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you have found something of value that you're going to be able to take as an empowering tool and use in your own life to open up these difficult conversations with your siblings, with your parents, with your children. These conversations aren't always easy, but they are incredibly helpful. And I think we are going to have, let's see, it's 9:44. So I think we have about 5 minutes. If you want to post any questions in the chat, I would be happy to address them. And one of the ones that people come up with a lot is like, I want to talk to my parents about this, but they don't want to hear about it. They say, don't be morbid, or they say, you're going to know what to do when the time comes. And what I want to encourage you to do, if that's the case, is to be vulnerable with them and say, Mom or Dad, I worry about this. I know you think I'm going to know, but I worry about this, and I would like you, please, to help relieve my worry, because planning helps relieve worry. We don't need to worry over and over about these things, but if we have a plan, it's easier to kind of set it aside. So thank you. I'm just looking at the chat. I'm not seeing any questions. Let's see. We are unable to show the video. Okay, thanks, Deborah. It's really a lovely video. I hope you get to see it another time. It's about a family going through very much what I went through. A dad who has repeated strokes and then ended up with a kind of painful death in the ER, where there is CPR that's inappropriate and that doesn't bring him back, but does create a chaotic feeling for the end of life. So I hope at some point you're going to get a chance to see that. Will you be doing this again? That's a great question. I am going to be doing something for the Hospice of Santa Barbara in January. I think that's a free presentation. You can probably find it if you Google Hospice of Santa Barbara. I think the 20th of January. And hopefully we're going to run this, Deborah, on Facebook and stream it, or maybe if you have any success, if the video's good enough quality, you might be able to try to put it on a.
Yes, Katie, we are sorry. I'm so sorry. I apologize. For some reason, the share screen is completely disabled and we are not able, we had everything set up, but you know, as 2020 shows us, you have to just adjust. So we certainly will have the video to be able to show, you know, on our website, and you know, the additional information. So I can share. I don't even know if you're able to, probably can't even read this because it looks like it's backwards. But so we will have all of the information on our website, which is 1889foundation.org. And we have recorded this webinar today. So we will also have the recording available. We will be sharing it on social media. It will be available in every, you know, in all formats that we can get out there. And we will have, the pulse.org and the 5 Wishes information, how people can go there and after they've talked with their family and talked with their doctor. And so yes, we apologize for the technical difficulties.
That's life.
The main event was Katy, and thank you so very much. And I don't want to stop you because we do have some time. If you wanted to take any questions in the chat.
Sure. Yes. One is somebody, the question authors always love. Repeat, please, the name of your book. So there's 2 books. One is called Knocking on Heaven's Door, and that's a wonderful, if I do say so myself, memoir of going through the family caregiving experience with an elderly parent. And it has a lot also about medicine in it and how we got to this place where medicine got so technological and sometimes, frankly, just ran away with us. So that's that book. But it's not a how-to book. It's not really a guide or a manual. And I realized that at the age of 71 myself, I need a guide so that hopefully I don't experience some of the mistakes that happened with my dad. And that is this book, this is my marked up copy that I use for my readings. But it's called The Art of Dying Well, A Practical Guide to a Good End of Life. And Deborah, I think the foundation has acquired a number of copies. Do you know how that might play out for people who hear? I signed a bunch of copies, or are those all spoken for? I don't know. Yeah. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, we will have that information available on our website as well.
Great.
As to how you can, somebody wants to get access to the book. Thank you for that.
Great. And also just Amazon. I mean, you can buy it at a bookstore, or even better, an independent bookstore. They're really struggling along with everything else these days. This was my boring graphic, but here are access to those sites that are so important. Prepare for Your Care has really user-friendly material on it. Really, really nice. 5 Wishes for $5. You can get it from either 5wishes.org or agingwithdignity.org. And then the Pennsylvania Post, again, very, very good website, very user-friendly, papost.org. So that's it's got sections for medical professionals and also sections to explain the post to the general public. So great. Okay, I'm glad. Yeah, I love that. Someone just said how much they like that final ritual. I just love it. I never get tired of it. It's so moving. And what I love about it is anyone can do this. I love it because it's non-denominational. It's not religious per se, although it's very poetic, very spiritual. And my whole mission in life is to empower you to trust your own best instincts, because I think we all have them. We have our common sense, we have our best instincts, we have our deeply held values. And if we can return to some confidence in that, I think it makes some of these difficult late life discussions much, much better. Okay, great. Okay, well, is that it? Are we out of time, Deborah? Yes,
I think so. And I am just going to end it with thank you tremendously, Katy, for this time. It's a hard, very hard subject, but a very, very important one. And so we thank you for what you do. Again, the video will be available to be able to be seen for sure on our website, 1889foundation.org. And I do want to thank obviously everyone out there for joining us. And again, this was recorded, so you will be able to also see this again or forward this to anybody that you feel would like to see it or needs to see it. And I just want to mention that this webinar was made possible by a grant that was provided by the Highmark Blue Cross and Blue Shield to the foundation, 1889 Foundation, in partnership with Conemaugh Health System. So thank you, Highmark, for making the funds available for both the video and for this wonderful presentation today. Katy, thank you very, very much. Stay well, stay healthy, and same to you all out there. Stay safe and stay well.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
It's been absolutely wonderful to work with you, and I really happy that at least we could do this way, if not in person. So maybe,
Yes.
next year in Jerusalem, one of these days we will be seeing each other in person again. So thanks so much.
God willing. Thank you
God
so
willing.
much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you all.
Yeah.